You don't really know a town until you've seen it through the eyes of a drunk man. And in Arthur's opinion, a town is only as good as its strongest shot. From the luxurious saloon of St. Denis to the rough but free drinks of Van Horn, every town in the world of Red Dead Redemption has a different way of getting intoxicated. So today, Arthur will be starting the ultimate bender. He is going to get drunk in every single town on the map, and along his way, he will be rating each one out of 30, all in the hopes he can find the perfect one. Can his body withstand 9 days of straight drinking? Let's find out. The first stop on Arthur's tour of the towns was of course Valentine. This was going to be a great baseline town to start his drunk journey. The town had 2 saloons. The first was the most classic saloon in the country, and the second was a bit more underground. This got Arthur excited to get the night going as he walked into town. He decided to start his night at the main Smithfield Saloon because there was no better place to have some drinks on this first night. I mean, the place was always bumping with some amazing piano, a great atmosphere, 2 floors, and a solid bar. The most unique thing about the saloon though was that it had a barber. That was a pretty cool addition. Arthur decided that he was going to start out the night with a beer from the bar. This was officially the beginning of what was about to be the ultimate bender, so he was pumped up to get drinking. After having another beer, he was getting a bit chatty. This was the perfect place to just talk and have a good time. So far, the saloon was exactly what he was looking for. As the night went on, he continued to have more drinks, but this time he moved on to whiskey. You know, another great perk of this bar were the free peanuts too. It was now time to go all in though, so he went drink after drink after drink, and finally after like 5, he decided to have a tiny break. The guy across from him at this table definitely looked like he might have taken the night a little too far. Arthur wondered if he would end up like that later. After that though, he wanted to continue this night at the other saloon. That was definitely one of the best parts of Valentine. He could drink at 2 different areas in one night. This one was a little less busy on the edge of town, and at first glance it looked super chill inside. This one was empty and it also had a great bar area. So just like before, Arthur was back to the shots. He was clearly in full drinking mode and he could not wait to keep going. Next though, as he headed back outside, he realized he was far from the only one impaired tonight. That was truly the culture of Valentine, and it made him feel like he wasn't the only one. Arthur then decided he was not finished for the night though. I mean, he was still standing on his feet. Once again, he headed back into the other saloon and continued to down more drinks. At this point, he could barely form a single thought, and the whole world around him was spinning. Then after what felt like 100 shots, the world went black. The morning was quiet in Valentine, and in that quietness was an outhouse. Well, guess what? Apparently Arthur had spent the night in this thing. Yeah, that was definitely a humbling and interesting place to wake up. Overall, Arthur had a great time though, but he was ready to move on to the next town. In terms of Valentine, the 2 saloons and the great overall vibes brought the drinking score to a 25 out of 30, making it a great benchmark to beat. The next town on Arthur's list was Strawberry, and at first glance, this place looked amazing. That was until he realized it was dry. That meant the town didn't allow any alcohol and there were absolutely no saloons. The only place Arthur figured he could find some drinks was hopefully at the general store. To his luck in there, he ended up finding a shelf of some, which was perfect. Now that he was stocked up, Arthur was ready to do some day drinking in a dry town. First, of course, he had to find an area where no one else would see him. Right around the store, he found an alley that looked already used for drinking. Getting to it right away though, he downed a few of the gins he bought at the store. These already gave him a buzz. You know, Arthur was not gonna lie, this was definitely going to be the most scenic place he could get drunk. Being up here on this bridge and looking down at the water was pretty awesome while intoxicated. Strawberry as a town just got better and better with every sip, so eventually he had an insane idea. Arthur was past the point of thinking straight as he leapt into action, climbing up this ladder. In no time, he found himself walking right to the edge of a water aqueduct. After putting one more drink in his system, Arthur stepped back and took the leap of faith. Ouch! That was certainly not the smooth water landing he expected. He had more to worry about though, as he was now basically drowning in this river. He was so disoriented that he could not grab onto anything to save himself. Was this the end of Arthur's life? Was his bender over? Arthur awoke on the hard ground. He must have washed up onto shore. He could not believe his luck and how dumb he was. So after sobering up, Arthur was ready to move on and reflect on his strawberry drinking experience. I mean, honestly, it was going to be hard to rate this place high, even though it was very nice in terms of scenery. Being a dry town, Arthur decided to give it a drinking score of 9 out of 30, because at the minimum, he was able to buy some at the store, but he certainly wished there was a saloon. The next town up on Arthur's list was Rhodes. This was a nice little western town, and within it was one of the single nicest saloons in the country. Arthur was honestly very excited to get drinking here. The saloon was called the Rhodes Parlor House, and upon walking in, he was liking it. The vibe in here was awesome. There were so many great seating spots, and even a blackjack table. The place felt more like a restaurant than just a bar, which Arthur enjoyed. Before any drinking began this time, he decided to have a quick meal, which was some nice catfish. To get started though, Arthur ordered his first beer of the day, which meant it was time to get the drinks flowing. After some more gin, he finally had a good buzz going. Arthur figured this was the perfect time to get some gambling going. He was in the mood to go all in, so he headed up the stairs to the blackjack table. Since he was feeling confident, he would be going all in on every hand. On this first one, his hand was a 15, and if he was sober, maybe he'd stand, but he was going to hit. Welp, let's just say he should not have. On the next hand though, his luck paid off, and he got the coveted blackjack. Yeah, that was one good way to end the session. With his pockets a little more full now, Arthur decided to chill out downstairs a bit. So far Rhodes was definitely a good experience, but he wanted a bit more. While drinking his next round though, a guy started pestering him. Arthur, being the guy he is, was not going to let him get away with it, so it was time for a good old-fashioned bar fight. Unfortunately, Arthur had a few too many drinks, so he was getting demolished. After some time though, he eventually got the upper hand, and he took the guy out clean. Yeah, that was his cue to flee. Even a drunk Arthur knew he had to get away from the crime scene. To his unfortunate surprise though, he ran right into the lawmen looking for him. At this point, his best move was to turn himself in and hope for the best. That was certainly not how he expected to end the day here, in a jail cell. Arthur's luck was answered though when he realized he was going to be bailed out. That's right, Dutch had come to save him. Arthur was somehow going to survive to make it to the next town. So far, Rhodes was a great time, but it just had an unexpected ending. He decided he would give the town a drinking score of 18 out of 30 due to its amazing saloon but overall chiller vibe. The next town on Arthur's journey was a huge step up. He was now in the big city of Saint Denis. Now this place seemingly had it all. There was a high-class saloon for those wanting an upscale drinking experience. There was also a standard run-of-the-mill saloon for the city's working class. Truly here in Saint Denis, he could get any type of experience. Arthur decided to start his drinking time at the Doyle's Tavern. This place had a good vibe to it. Sure, it wasn't the nicest he'd seen, but that didn't matter as long as the drinks were good and the people were chill. As he walked in, he was ready to get the night going. To start out, he ordered a couple of beers. Next, he saw the cutest thing he had seen so far, the bar cat. Yeah, this was definitely something that the other saloons had been missing. After that though, he had a couple more beers and then he decided to chill in the atmosphere. Then it was time for him to move on. He headed outside and made his way to a bench. The nice thing about Saint Denis is that no one looked too close at what you were doing. I mean, look at how close he was to two cops. He didn't care and they didn't care, so he continued drinking. After the brief break, Arthur wanted to head to the fancy saloon to drink. This was going to be the complete opposite experience of what he just had. As soon as he walked in, he knew this was going to be amazing. The place was on a whole other level of class. Everything about it screamed luxury, including the various drink selections at the bar. Since he was there, Arthur was going to splurge on the drinks a bit, ordering the expensive whiskey and avoiding beer. Even though he felt a little out of place here, he was able to down shot after shot after shot, where eventually he was fully into it. At this point, Arthur was very drunk, so next he wanted to go check out the upstairs area of the saloon. Up here was one of the coolest amenities out of any town or saloon so far. This place had a balcony seating area. Being up here at night was just such a vibe. This was the perfect place to continue the drinks and just relax at the same time. After putting 3 more in his system, the world went black. Arthur woke up having fallen off something. What a way to wake up. Wow. Arthur certainly was confused about how that happened, but he was ready to move on. Saint Denis was excellent, and Arthur decided to score it a solid 27 out of 30 for the drinking score. This city was definitely going to be hard to beat. The next town for Arthur was Annesburg, and right away it looked like a downgrade. This was a mining town, so there were zero expectations for drinking standards. I mean, the workers had to have something though, so hopefully he'd find drinks. It looked like Annesburg had some sort of bar, but unfortunately as Arthur went to head in, the place was locked up. That was certainly not a good start, as the place was completely closed up. Next, moving on though, Arthur kept his hopes high as he noticed the general store across the street. As he went in, he was met with the same fate. The place was completely locked up, and apparently it was permanently closed according to this sign. Arthur could not believe it. The town had zero alcohol for him. Annesburg was certainly not good so far, and the only thing he could do at this point was drink some of his own. Thankfully, he had come prepared in case of this exact problem. Next, Arthur made his way up the town slowly, and at the top he had a great idea. He was going to climb all the way to the top of this mining infrastructure, because up here, he got an amazing view. You know, this proved all he needed to do was improvise a little sometimes. All was good up here until his fun was cut short. He was in deep trouble for being up here. I guess the only way to solve that was to take matters into his own hands. Maybe he wouldn't have done that sober, but at this point he was not going to let anyone get in the way of the drinking. After like 5 drinks, he realized he should probably get down before he got cornered. So after an unforgiving fall, he got up and started to run to the mines. That's right, his next plan was to escape into the mines of Annesburg. This was going to be the perfect plan to get away and drink. As he ran in, he stopped for a bit and had a drink, of course. Except this one pushed him over the edge completely. Everything went black once again. Arthur woke up surprisingly not in the mines. He was definitely feeling a little rough though. He was going to give Annesburg a 5 out of 30 for the drinking score, as he literally had to bring his own drinks. Now though, that town was done and he was ready to move on to the next one. The next town, Blackwater, started with a great impression. This was the second biggest city behind St. Denis, so Arthur knew there would definitely be a great saloon. He was proven right when he spotted it. Unlike Annesburg, he'd actually be able to order something to drink. Inside, it looked decent. It was a little smaller than he expected, but it had a good vibe. There was an upstairs seating area and some poker as well too. The bar itself also looked solid. Like usual, Arthur started out with a beer. By now, he was getting into a full routine for each town. It was pretty simple, just continue to drink, drink, and drink. After a solid start, Arthur decided to switch it up a bit. He headed to the general store right across the street, and he bought up their entire drink stock. Now that he was geared up, he headed to the lake. Blackwater had an amazing boardwalk, and it was probably Arthur's favorite part of the town. Honestly, it was as good as it got. Standing out here on the water and drinking up was amazing. After some more, Arthur was finally a bit drunk, which in turn gave him another great idea.
The cowardly killer that shot Mr. Miller.
Arthur was going to scale the buildings. That's right, he climbed all the way to the top. This was an even better place to drink. The only concern at this point was that he hopefully wouldn't fall off. A couple drinks and hours later, the sun was starting to set. Being here was an amazing feeling. After those final ones, Arthur was ready to get down. He stood up and started walking to the edge, barely able to keep his balance. All it took was one little slip up and Arthur felt himself falling down. Arthur woke up off the ground. He felt so bad right now and he could not believe he survived that. Looking back, that was his dumbest idea yet. Moving past that though, he gave Blackwater a solid 22 out of 30 drinking score. The next town on Arthur's list was Armadillo. Now this town was not looking promising in any aspect. I mean, the first thing he found were a bunch of dead bodies. The town had suffered a major cholera outbreak that left it nearly empty. Anyone remaining here was infected and approaching death. I mean, surprisingly though, there was still an operating saloon, which to be fair was already better than some of the other towns. Still though, Arthur was not exceptionally excited to drink here. He headed to the saloon with very low expectations, and as soon as he got in, his mind didn't change. This was by far the most depressing saloon he had seen so far. The place was nearly empty, and anyone in here looked on the brink of death. I mean, at least the place still had drinks, which was important. Arthur just hoped that the drinks were shipped before the outbreak. As he started to drink, a guy came up to him warning him to leave, and honestly that really spooked Arthur. After having one more shot and a beer, he decided it was not smart to stay. If he blacked out here, there was a good chance he'd never wake up again. Arthur made the executive decision to move on. Armadillo would be getting a terrible 3 out of 30 drinking score because of that. The next town was another in the desert. This was Tumbleweed, and it was very small, but at least alive compared to Armadillo. The town even had a saloon, which was awesome too. Upon walking in, it was honestly very impressive for such a small town. It had a piano, a decent charming interior, a very respectable bar, and even a second floor. Arthur figured this was a much better place to drink, and he felt far more comfortable here. He even ordered chili to eat too. After a few drinks, Arthur was feeling it a bit though. He decided to head upstairs and see what he'd find. Here, he found a strange looking door. It looked very secure, so he was very curious. Once inside, he found what looked like a poker table and a nice couch to chill on. In here, he decided to have some more to drink, and then it was time for him to relax for the night. Maybe tonight, for the first time in a while, he would not black out. Arthur awoke the next morning, somehow on the table. That was a little uncomfortable, he couldn't lie. Thankfully though, Tumbleweed improved from Armadillo. Arthur decided to give it a respectable score of 13 out of 30. Finally, it was time for the final town on this ultimate bender. Arthur was finally at the final boss of drinking, Van Horn. This place was on a whole other level compared to any of these other ones. First of all, there are no police here, anything goes. Another fact is that everyone here drinks and there is no shortage of free ones. The whole place is basically built on drinking, so of course there was a saloon too. Literally the first person Arthur met heading in happened to be drunk, of course. After that though, instead of the saloon first, Arthur decided to head to one of the many spots he knew for free alcohol. In this abandoned building was the ultimate stash of free beer. There were always some guys in here willing to share, so Arthur would take full advantage. Sure, the place was a little sketchy, but that was all a part of the Van Horn experience. Next, Arthur knew another great place to find drinks. The next drinking location was this docked boat. There was another beer crate that was entirely free. I mean, at this point, it's clear that Van Horn was an alcoholic's Disney World. Arthur downed so many drinks here until he finally got drunk. He was really enjoying this. Finally now, though, he decided to head to the saloon. It had a great vibe inside. It was very big and of course had even more drinks. The only problem was he actually had to pay now. Hey, that was no problem though, Arthur had plenty more to drink. By now he was absolutely plastered and he was ready for the next event. As he stumbled across town, he knew exactly what he wanted to do next. He was going to climb the lighthouse. After climbing multiple ladders and stairs, he had made it to the top. The view up here was incredible. He could see the entire town. Maybe this was the best drinking spot yet. All Arthur knew though is that he had to go all out for this final town, and this was the place to do it. After like 5 more drinks, he figured it was time to head down. Arthur woke up on the ground. He had blacked out on his last night, of course. Wow though, he could not believe his bender was finally over. After blacking out over 5 times, he needed to pick his favorite drinking town. When rating Van Horn, he took into account everything and came up with a final score of 28 out of 30. That's right, Van Horn won the Best Drinking Town award. It even beat Saint Denis and Valentine. So if you're looking for the best place to get drunk, Arthur highly recommended Van Horn.